Hello and welcome. This tutorial builds on my last video, which showed how to create multiple objects that move around and bounce on a P5.js canvas. What I'm going to do today is extend that idea and actually come up with a way to interact with the objects and really to interact with the canvas itself. Specifically, what I'm going to do is show you how to click in different places on the canvas and extract the mouse coordinates of the click, and then use those mouse coordinates to create a new ball at that location. So we're going to click somewhere to create a new ball. And then I'm going to add in a button down here below the canvas, just a regular old HTML button, so that when you click on it, we'll delete a ball from the canvas. And so that way what we're doing is moving towards a more full interactive game, so to speak, where the user has the ability to interact with the objects that are moving around on the canvas. All right, so those are the two things I'm going to cover in today's lesson. And if you aren't familiar with the code that generates this particular canvas and these elements, it is from the last video, so you might want to go back and watch that if you don't know where this came from. So right now I have a canvas with 4 balls bouncing around on it, and I have control over how many there are. With this parameter right here, I can set this to any one of a number of integers. I can make 400 if I want, but in fact right now I'm going to make 0. So there are no objects on my canvas at all. And some of you might be wondering, well, gee, if there's no balls defined inside the array, how come I'm not getting an error? You can see my console is clean over here. How come I'm not getting an error when the browser tries to draw or move or bounce a ball that doesn't exist? And that's a good question if you're wondering that. And I have an answer for you. The reason is because of the way that the code is structured. I have this nice nifty for loop here, which is what does all the calls to the move and the bounce functions for all the balls and tries to draw them. And since that for loop looks at the array of balls and looks at its length and then iterates through that and does something to each element in it, if there's nothing in it, then the length, of course, is 0, and the for loop just doesn't ever end up running. So none of these methods end up getting called, which is good, because if there's no balls in the array, you don't want to call those methods on null. Right? That's when you're going to start getting exceptions, and you'd see those over here. Right? So it sort of, the way the code is structured, it just takes care of itself, and there are no problems by making this 0. So let's start off like that. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and show you how it is that you can get mouse coordinates from the canvas, and also you can click on it to get those coordinates. All right, so those of you who come from a processing background that have taken the previous course that we offer, you know that there's a function for interacting with for getting mouse presses, and it's right here. I've actually already written it in. That function is mouse pressed, and if we were writing in processing code, of course, you would say void mouse pressed, and you'd be overriding the mouse pressed function that way. But here in a JavaScript environment, there's obviously no return types for functions because there are no types. There are no type declarations for anything, for variables for that matter. So we just simply keyword function, mouse pressed, and then inside the mouse pressed function we can do anything that we want. And I'm just choosing to alert the 2 coordinates, mouse X and mouse Y. Right? And all I've done here is built myself a little string inside the alert, which just concatenates or joins together this little X, X colon, and then the actual X coordinate, and then Y colon, and then the actual Y coordinate. Right? I don't need to have these labels in here, but I think it just makes it a little nicer when we see it on the screen. Okay, so that's mouse pressed. So I'm going to show you what that does. And there's something important that I definitely need to point out about this. So here we go. Here's the canvas. Right, I suppose we should go take a look at the size of it while we're at it, just so we know. It's 500 by 300. Okay. All right, so I'm going to come over here and click right in the middle as much as I can. Let's see. Okay. And you can see those coordinates are relatively close to what should be the middle of a 500 by 300 rectangle. Let's go ahead and dismiss the alert box. I'll move a little bit to the right and down. Okay, there we go. All right, that's almost spot on. Good. I'm going to come up here and click in the upper left-hand corner. You can see 12 and 11, almost 12. And I'm going to go right up here and right up in the very corner and click right there. Watch what happens, okay? Okay, it's 2, 3, and a little bit more. Let's see if I can get 1, 1 or 0, 0. Let's go a little more. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Negative. Negative for y, 0.875. That's interesting. And if I go a little further to the left, actually, I can get a negative x. Right? And so what this is telling you, this is significant, and this is super important. If you haven't figured it out by now, what it's telling you is that the coordinates for mouse x and mouse y are relative to the canvas, not the page. So 0, 0 is not going to be up here in the left-hand corner of the page. It's there. It's the left-hand corner of the canvas. And I can actually click outside the canvas, which is interesting. So I can click here or here and get numbers that don't really make much sense, because if what I'm trying to do is build some interactive feature with my for my canvas, why would I ever want to let the user click out here? For example, if I'm going to create a ball at some location on the canvas, I don't want to create a ball with an x coordinate of this, right? So you have to think about that. All coordinates for mouse x and mouse y, when you get them, are relative to the upper left-hand corner of the canvas itself. And it is possible to click outside of the canvas and to get numbers that are, in a sense, useless to you. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now I want to go ahead and actually place a ball on the canvas by using that technique. Okay, we'll see what happens if we click outside the canvas as well after we do that. All right, so let's go ahead and inside my mouse pressed function here, I'm going to get rid of this alert because I don't need that anymore. I'll just comment it out actually for you. Now remember how it is that we put balls into the array, right? I did that here. And that's my for loop, my initial for loop inside of setup that pushes any one of a number of balls, in this case none, but potentially thousands if I want, into the array. Right? And the key syntax there is dot push. So you have your array, which at this point is empty. It's been declared up here. And then I push into the array, or shove into the array, a new ball. So there it is. I'm just going to take that line of code and copy it, come down here, and I'm just going to put that in mouse pressed. So the thing is that last time when I wrote this code, I was interested in making numerous balls all at once. And to make it simple, I just wanted to use this random generator here to position them. And I don't think I want that now, because I want to actually make the ball at the x and the y coordinate where I clicked. So what I'm going to want to do is go back and get rid of this randomness. So I'm going to remove this. And instead here, inside the, well, what is really, in a sense, the constructor for the ball class, I'm going to put parameters to get the x and the y coordinate of the mouse, right? And I think I'll just say, I'll call them xi and yi for x initial and y initial. And then I'll set the properties of each ball, the x and the y properties of each ball, equal to those right there. And that way, when I call new ball up here, when I actually call this function, I can pass in here as arguments the mouse x and the mouse y, and then they'll go in for these two, and then they'll get assigned, right, to the x and y properties of each ball. So let's do that. All right. So I haven't written much code today. And all I've done essentially is just added this function and changed the constructor here so things aren't random. All right, let's hopefully this works. Let's see. So there's nothing on the canvas. I'm going to click to add a ball right there. Oh, there you go. Let's try it again. There it is. Cool. Everywhere I click. Now, if you wanted, I could also get fancy, and right now I'm letting the velocity be random for both x and y. Always positive, though, notice. Right? I don't have any provision in here for getting like a negative starting velocity. That's possible, obviously, but I don't have it. So, but I could get fancy also, and what I could do is when I click, I could click and hold and sort of drag the mouse in a given direction, and then that drag could set the velocity coordinates, or not the coordinates, but the velocity values if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that right now, but that is an idea, right, that you might want to implement. So you click and you hold, and if you drag like that, then you get a ball with a large velocity that goes down to the left. If you just sort of drag a little bit, you know, a little click and a little drag, you get a small velocity in the direction of the drag. That would not be difficult to do, and I can imagine that being useful. All right. But in the interest of time, what I'm going to do instead is show you how to put a button down here, an HTML button, and use that button to remove balls that you've just put on the canvas. And actually, before I do that, I want to click outside the bounds of the canvas and see what happens. Here, in fact, let me reload the page so there's no balls. All right, let's try right here. Right, and I'm not seeing anything appear. Now, I don't have any provision in my code for not creating ball at that coordinate. And so I assume that every time I click, I am creating something. And probably the easiest way to see if I am would be in mouse pressed after I push a new ball into the array. Let's just log that array. And we'll take a look at it and see what's in there. Okay, so with a refresh, I'll click over here. All right, so you can see now there is an array with a ball in it at 684 and a y value of 19. Okay, let me try clicking over here. There's two balls in the array now. All right, you can see them. Clicking over here, clicking over here. And it's interesting, right? They have negative velocities because, let's see, I think the velocity gets made negative when the x-coordinate of the ball is greater than the right side of the canvas. I think that's how we created our bounce function. And similar for the y, right? But I never see them. But they're there, aren't they? Right? Because I can keep clicking, and that array keeps growing. You can see there's 11 balls in there now, all with coordinates that are too far to the right, and all with these velocities. Some are positive now, some are negative, but they never show up. It's not like they make their way over to the right at any point in time. Right? So what's going on? What's happening? And I don't think I want that behavior, right? Because it's undesirable to have objects in my game that I'm not drawing. Why am I keeping track of these things using memory, using processor cycles to calculate their positions and their movements if they're not actually elements in my game? So this is bad. I don't want to let this happen. But the other question is, well, where are they? I mean, don't they at any point kind of make their way to smaller values of x so that they show up? And of course, the answer is they don't, because of the bounce function and the way it's written. So the bounce function here, what its job is to do is to look at the x-coordinate of a ball and say, hey, you know, if that coordinate is greater than the width or less than 0, then I'm going to flip its velocity from positive to negative. So I think you can probably imagine what's happening is that since this function happens every 60th of a second, right, or approximately every 15 milliseconds, that is, what happens is if the ball's over here to the right, sure, its x-coordinate is greater than the right side of the canvas, so let's flip its velocity. So if it was initially moving to the right, we're going to move it to the left. But in 15 milliseconds, that's not enough time for it to get over onto the canvas. So then once again, its x-coordinate shows up as being greater than the right side of the canvas. And that, let's see, that flips its velocity negative again, but it was already negative, and that makes it positive. So now it starts moving back to the right. And then 15 milliseconds later, same thing happens. Velocity gets switched to be negative, and it moves back to the left. So these objects are there, but they're just sort of quivering every 15 milliseconds off here to the right side of the canvas, and I'm using system resources to do that, which is totally pointless. So what I would want to do in here is make it so that this function, or this call to the ball constructor in here, only happens if the mouse x and the mouse y coordinates are indeed within the confines of the canvas. Okay, so this would not, I'm not done with it. I'm done. I'll leave that to you for you to do as an exercise. But you'd want to put in here some kind of conditional statement, like if mouse x is greater than 0 and less than canvas.width, some such thing, then do this. And you'd have to do similarly for y, right? You need that as well. Otherwise, don't do this. Okay. Having made that point, I'd rather spend some time going on and putting a button in and removing balls with it. I think what I'll just do in the to show you good programming practices is here what I would do if I were actually writing this and intending to fix this problem later. I would leave myself a comment and say, must fix or must restrict new balls to being only on the canvas. Do this later. A lot of times also when I'm writing code, what I will do is come down to the bottom of my file here, and I'll literally give myself a comment, like a to-do comment like this, right? And then down here I'll start generating a list of things that I plan on doing later. And so fix the problem where balls can be created off canvas. And that's just something that I find really helpful, so that when I come back to this later on, if it's been a day or two in between, I can remember where I left off and I know what I should start with. Okay. So again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to move ahead and put in a button that's used to remove balls that are drawn on the canvas. And the thing about this is there are many ways to do it. You could actually put something on your canvas itself. You could draw some type of rectangular box and check where the mouse is pressed on the canvas, and if it's within the confines of the box, then you could do something, and that something is going to be to remove a ball. That would be the way that you would have done it in processing itself. You would have had to actually create a button using a box on the canvas. And we can do that, but we don't have to, and that's the thing. The really cool thing here about working for the web is that we already have a large library of elements that we can use, buttons and sliders and all sorts of input boxes and things like that. These are already objects that are already drawn on the screen. They're the HTML elements that we already know and love. So why not use those instead of having to make our own pseudo boxes and buttons and things that we put on the canvas itself. In fact, it's arguable that I don't really want those things on the canvas. The canvas is just the place that the balls move around on. So I'd like to put them down below. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come back to my HTML file this time. And after my div, which holds my canvas, it's been probably a long time since you looked at this file, so I'll refresh your memory that there is a div that has the canvas inside of it. So after that, I'm going to create a button. I'm going to give it an ID while I'm here, and that ID is just going to be, let's call it the delete button. And we'll put some text on it. It just says remove a ball, like so. Okay, there you have it. Then coming back to my JavaScript file and taking an extra minute to note that ID. In fact, I think I'll copy that while I'm at it. Come back over here and up at the top of my code here, I'm going to type var dl button equals, and we'll just do a quick grab to get the reference to that element. We do document.get element by ID or document.query selector, like so. And the query selector is, let's see, it's a class. So not a class, sorry, it's a ID. So it's hashtag, and then delete button, like that. Okay. And then I can add an event listener to it at some point. Let's see, let's do that. Let's do that next. So right here, we'll say delete button dot add event listener, and we'll just say click on the button, and then we have to call some function, some handler or callback, whatever you want to refer to it as, that will trigger when the button is clicked. And I can come up with a name for that function. I could do something like remove ball, right? And remember, when you do this, you do not put parentheses there. You just say remove ball and that line. And then down here, you have to define that function. You have to say function remove ball, and then inside here you would do your thing, right? But as you get better in JavaScript and more comfortable with these things, nobody really does that anymore. You just kind of use these anonymous functions. You just put the function right there, and you go like that, right? And then you have to end the argument list for the function. So it looks something like that. There's the beginning of the argument list for add event listener. Is that parentheses there? There's the end of it, and then I'm just going to put a function right inside there. Once again, you see that? You just type keyword function, put your parentheses there for the function, go like that, open curly braces, close curly braces like that, and then when it's all said and done, you end your function. Some people do it like that. I like it like that. Okay, so what do we want to have happen when the button is clicked? Well, the very first thing I'm going to do is just pop up an alert to make sure it works at all, right? Just say alert, you pressed the delete button. Let's watch what happens when I do this. Oops. Okay. Okay, refreshed. Nothing on the screen. Oh, that's interesting. Look at that. A little error over here. And the text of this is crucial to understand. It says, cannot read property add event listener of null. You're like, line 6, cannot read property add event listener of null. On line 6, let's go back to the code. We'll look at line 6. Oh yeah, that's where I was trying to add the event listener to the delete button. And apparently what I'm being warned of is that it's impossible. I can't do that. I can't add event listener to something that's null. Null means it doesn't exist, right? It means I don't actually have a button. Well, I have a button, right? It's there. You can see it. There's the button. I also notice another problem is that when I'm clicking on the button, the mouse pressed on the canvas is actually registering that I'm clicking over there. So that is bad, and I actually probably am going to have to go back and make sure that that stops, right? Because I don't want that. So that's a whole other problem. But right, you can see that because I'm adding balls to the array as I click on a remove button, right? Just like I'm clicking down here. So no good. We'll have to go back and fix that after all. Okay, so be it. But this error is perplexing, right? Sort of. But actually, this happens all the time. And I'm going to use this opportunity to point out a super common problem that comes up here all the time with scripting and HTML. And here's what's going on. You think you created the button, and you did create the button because it's right there, right? And maybe you think you got the reference wrong. Maybe there is no, delete button, but it's right. There it is. That's the ID. It's there. Here I am. I've got, query selector. I know that works. I've used that thousands of times, whatever. I've got my hashtag. I'm sure this is all right. I don't understand. Why is this delete button coming back null? right? And so now might be a good time for you to pause the video and just kind of take a break and think about it, right? Look at the code maybe that you wrote and try to figure out what's going on. I'm going to assume that you did that and just kind of come back and tell you what's going on. So, as I said, super common for this problem to happen. And what it boils down to is where you placed the script tag that calls this drawing script. You put it here in the head of the page, and that's cool. It seems to work fine, but it will fail here because the button doesn't get created until you're in the body here. The body of the page is the body. It's all the elements on the page itself. So if you put the script tag here, then the script tag will load and run here before the body is even created. So this button doesn't exist yet. It hasn't been made yet. And yet this script is running first and asking the document to give it a reference to what? To something that doesn't exist yet. Right? So in the kind of the technical terms, we would say the DOM hasn't been created yet. The DOM, D-O-M, capital D-O-M, which is just short for the document object model. Right? That's just the document object model is just sort of the tree structure, the nested structure of all of the elements that exist on the page itself. Well, the DOM hasn't been created yet because we haven't gotten here in the parsing of this page, this HTML. We haven't gotten to this point yet. So there's no button. So I can't ask for a reference from, to something that doesn't exist yet. There's a couple of different ways around this. One of the tricks is you can put in your JavaScript, you can kind of take this code and wrap it all inside a function that says, hey, don't run until the page announces that it is built completely. And there's actually a function that gets an event that gets fired off when a page is completely finished building its DOM, right? It's a page load event or some such thing. There are actually a couple of different functions that get triggered one after the other. And you can sort of say, okay, I want you to hold off on doing all of this until that happens. And in fact, that's how P5.js does it. That's, you didn't have to worry about any of these problems with the Canvas and with P5, because P5 just kind of internally, secretly behind the scenes, just holds off and waits until the page has been built before it actually goes ahead and does anything, creates its canvas, and so on and so forth. But you don't. You're not doing that here. You haven't written that functionality into your attempt to get a reference to the button. So you could do that, right? And I could definitely show you how it is that you put, that you wait for the page to load before you do anything like this. And that used to be very popular to do that. There are now numerous ways to avoid this problem, right? Numerous ways. And I'll be, because it's such a common problem, I think as we kind of go on, I'll show you some of the different tricks for fixing this. But right now, the easiest thing to do, and really the fastest thing to do, is to just cut that out of there and just put it here. So I mentioned once before in a much earlier video that you could do this. You could take your script and just put it as the last thing in the body, the very last thing that fires at the end of the parsing of the body. And that way you can be sure that the button will have been created already before the script loads and tries to get a reference to it. So that's one quick fix for this problem. And processing isn't going to care if you do that. So we go ahead, refresh the page, the error is gone. I can click, I can make a ball, I can click, so on and so forth. And I can also click here and get my pop-up, right? But again, I do have the problem of creating an extra ball when I do that, and it's an off-canvas ball, so I don't want to do that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do then is go ahead and, having fixed the referencing problem, I'm going to go back and get and constrain things so that I can't create balls off the screen. And as I said, there's an easy way to do that. Of course, you just say if mouse x is greater than 0 and mouse x is less than, and what's the name of my canvas? CANV. Okay. CANV dot width and mouse, because we have to constrain vertically too, so mouse Y is greater than 0, and mouse Y is less than can dot height. If those things are true, then and only then will we push the ball into the canvas like so. Otherwise we won't. And actually we could actually throw an alert that says something to the effect of else alert and say you need to click in the canvas only or something like that. But that's going to get annoying actually, because when we click on the button to remove the ball, we're going to see that. So I'm going to leave that alone. Okay. And then let's log the different balls to see and make sure that things are going okay. All right, refreshing. Let's see. So there's 1, there's 2. Let's click down here. Oh, look at that. See, these numbers are not going up, right? It's still just 2 balls in the canvas. If you hit the disclosure triangle, you can see each one. The first ball, which is element 0, and all its properties. The second ball, which is element 1, all its properties. And nothing else is happening. Certainly not when I click on the button either. But if I click in the window, done. All right, cool. Let's hook up that button to have it do something. So inside the, where was I? Let's see here. In the event listener to the buttons click method, instead of this little alert right here, this is actually quite simple. I'm just going to say balls dot, dot what? What is the opposite of push? If push pushes an element into an array, what pulls the element out of the array or removes it? Pull. Is it pull? I don't know. Let's see. Is it pull? It's not. That won't work. So the opposite of push is actually, of course, obviously, pop. All right, pop. So when you pop an object from an array, what you do is you actually take the last one in. So the last object that you pushed in at the end of the array, you pop it off the end of the array. You remove it. So arrays are kind of like the last one in is the first one out. The last one in is first one. You put one in, you put another one in, you put another one in, and then as you start taking them out, you remove from the back. All right, that's actually last one in, first one out. That's a very different data structure than a lot of things in life that you're used to. Like if you think about how a line works waiting in a queue for lunch, let's say, at the sandwich line in your cafeteria, it doesn't work that way. Right? The last one in is definitely not the first one out. Think about the ethics of that. It doesn't go like that. But in fact, you'd be angry if it did. But arrays, that's how they behave. So when you pop, you remove. And actually, that returns to you the last element of the array. If you wanted to do anything with it, it would actually return it to you. All right, but you don't. You just want to remove it. So let's save, come back, refresh. Okay, here we go. Let's put a ball on. Let's put another one. Let's put another one. There are now 3. Okay, let's click to remove. Here we go. The moment of truth here. Oh, look at that. One is gone. The other one's gone. And the last one's gone. Let's put another one back. Yep, there we go. Okay, there are 4. Let's remove them. Cool. It works. Let's click one more time. No problem, right? If you're wondering if there's going to be an error if you try to pop something off an array that has nothing in it, no. You can pop all day long, and it's just an empty array. Nothing happens. Now put a ball back. Great. Remove it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And remove them all. Okay? All right, there you have it. Hopefully this has been instructive. I covered a lot of things in this video. I think the surprise is that whole referencing trick, trying to get the reference to something that hasn't been created yet, and having to move that script tag from up here in the head down here to the end of the body. And as I said, we'll see other ways to do that in the future. If you really wanted to leave it up here, there are some keywords that you can put in to basically tell it to wait at this level. And then there's a way to do it in here as well. Okay, so that's just something that you'll see repeatedly, but I wanted to have an opportunity to show that to you, and I think this was a good time to do it. All right, that wraps this up. Go ahead and make something yourself that uses these concepts, but perhaps behaves a little differently, or draws something other than balls, and makes something more interesting. You can also feel free to put in more buttons that do other things. Now that you know how to interact with the things on the canvas with these buttons, you can make a button that speeds up all of the velocities of everything, or slows them down simply by making it so that when you click on that button, you loop through the array of balls, in my case, and change the velocity of everyone. Because you have the ability to do that, to loop through the balls array and do something to each one of them. Right? Just you can access their properties. You can get their x and y values, you can get their vx and their vy value, and you can change them. All right, so lots of things are now possible. Have fun, good luck, and thanks for watching.